thumping, beating trumpets. Both candidates for the US presidential election tried to ensure that their voters remain confident before the 5th November vote.
But all I can say is on Tuesday, just go out and vote, and we're going to close this thing out, and it's going to be party time. It's going to be party time. And this is really all you need to know. Kamala broke it, and I'll fix it, and we'll do it very quickly.
So, Michigan, 2 days to go. You ready? In one of the most consequential elections of our lifetime, and we have momentum. It is on our side. Can you feel it? And we have the momentum because our campaign is tapping into the ambitions, the aspirations, and the dreams of the American people. Because we are optimistic and excited about what we can do together.
Both promised voters of a golden future. While one talked about tax and price cuts, the other promised to end a war.
So with your vote on Tuesday, we're going to fire Kamala, and we are going to save America. We will cut your taxes, end inflation, slash your prices, raise your wages, and bring thousands of factories back to America and back to the good old state of Georgia.
And I want to say, this year has been difficult, given the scale of death and destruction in Gaza, and given the civilian casualties and displacement in Lebanon. It is devastating. And as president, I will do everything in my power to end the war in Gaza. To bring home the hostages, end the suffering in Gaza, ensure Israel is secure, and ensure the Palestinian people can realize their right to dignity, freedom, security, and self-determination.
One thing is for sure, that this was a very colorful election campaign, and both candidates have been neck and neck throughout. Posters are busy predicting the front-runner. Atlas Inter's latest poll shows former President Donald Trump leading the predictions, especially in all 7 swing states. About 49% of the respondents said they would vote for Donald Trump in the upcoming presidential election, as the Republicans hold a 1.8% vote lead over his counterpart, Democrat Kamala Harris. The survey conducted on the first 2 days of November included nearly 2,500 likely voters in the US, the majority of which were female. A Reuters Ipsos poll published last week on 29 October showed Kamala Harris lead over Donald Trump, with the Democrat ahead by few percentage points over the Republican, 49% to 46%. The American website 538 of ABC focuses on opinion poll analysis. In their latest release, Harris had a small lead over Trump in the national polling averages, 48% to 47%.
Making Donald Trump one of the biggest losers.
The current Vice President Kamala Harris has led Trump in every Reuters, Ipsos and ABC 538 poll of registered voters since she entered the race in July and built a lead of nearly 4 percentage points towards the end of August. The polls were relatively stable in September and early October, but they have tightened in the last couple of weeks, with her lead steadily shrinking since late September. While national polls are a useful guide as to how popular a candidate is across the whole country, they are not the best way to predict the US presidential election result. Bureau Report, India Today.
Kamala, you're fired. Get out of here.
And probably the most viral story from the American poll battlefield, a social media sensation that has captured American attention and fascination, is Peanut the squirrel, rescued by New Yorker Mark Longo and a viral star in his own little right, was recently taken by state authorities and euthanized for rabies testing. This has sparked widespread outrage. Peanut's tragic fate has become a focal point in a very heated final lap in the US election. As we pay tribute to little Peanut, watch this story.
A social media sensation, Peanut the squirrel, has shaken up American politics days before crucial elections. Peanut was rescued by New Yorker Mark Longo and lived with him for 7 years. On Saturday, Longo was raided and Peanut taken away by the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation and the Health Department. Peanut was later euthanized to test for rabies.
It not only tears my family apart, but Peanut was the cornerstone of our nonprofit animal rescue. And 10 to 12 DEC officers raided my house as if I was a drug dealer. I was sat outside my house for 5 hours. I had to get a police escort to my bathroom. I wasn't even allowed to feed my rescue horses breakfast or lunch. I was sat there like a criminal.
A raccoon also in Longo's care was also taken away and euthanized to test for rabies. The viral squirrel's euthanasia triggered massive outrage online. With number of Trump supporters criticizing the Democrat government, the controversy was amplified by Donald Trump's top backer, Tesla CEO Elon Musk. American state law requires people to get a license if they wish to own a wild animal. Longo says he was working to get Peanut the required certification. Peanut amassed hundreds of thousands of followers on Instagram and TikTok. But at the peak of American elections, its death would be its most viral moment. Bureau Report, India Today.
Meanwhile, India Today's Rohit Sharma, who for months now has been tracking the latest of these political developments, decided to get into a campaign bus at the Capitol Hill. This is what he found out about who are the individuals rooting for, why do they think Trump or Kamala Harris would be the better president.
We're currently in the bus that is taking us to Pennsylvania. Now, we have this exclusive event that we are covering with the Indian American voters, and it is going to be a big event in Pennsylvania. A lot of people are converging there because they know how important Pennsylvania is. 19 electoral college votes from the state of Pennsylvania, and these volunteers and voters believe that that they can actually convince some of those independent voters that will end up deciding who gets to the White House. So throughout the entire day, we'll be traveling in this bus. As you can see, we will be talking to some of the volunteers and voters, asking them their opinion about what they will be doing in their capacity to make sure that they could convince some of these independent voters to vote for Vice President Kamala Harris. There will be some door knocking that we will cover, and we will be embedded with this entire volunteer team as they knock doors in Pennsylvania.
As you can see right now, this volunteer is helping some of the people get through this app. Now, this is called a van pool app, and what this app does essentially it allows people to be able to know which houses they have to go and talk to. So some of these voters, it gives them an address, a name of the individual that they would be speaking to. So this volunteer on the bus is helping people download the app that will allow them to campaign.
Absolutely. So basically what I was doing is talking to all the different volunteers and making sure that they have Minivan downloaded on their phone, which Minivan is a platform that allows you to see all of the voters and the person that you're talking to information in a succinct place, to allow everything to be there with a script as well, to make it easier for the people who are door knocking, to make sure it's the most simplest activity that you could be doing, and to help make sure that we can get out the polls.
Just tell us about, how did this idea about taking South Asians to Pennsylvania come about, and your organization and what you've been doing up till now?
So yes, it is very close. So every vote matters, and as you know, the swing states, how the electoral college works here. The swing states kind of decide who the president is. So I live in Maryland, right? So I vote, but I feel like I have to do work in the swing states, right? Mobilize people, because their say is going to determine who is going to be the president for all of us.
Congressman, thank you so much for joining us and talking to us today.
Thank you.
Just out of curiosity, Congresswoman, you were a Democrat and you ran a presidential campaign in 2020, and now you have endorsed President Trump. What made you change your decision and becoming, endorsing President Trump, and what was the reason for you to do so?
Oh, first of all, I left the Democrat Party a few years ago because today's Democrat Party is controlled and led by this elitist cabal of warmongers who are undermining our freedom, fundamentally censoring free speech, undermining the rule of law and our democratic republic. There are many examples that I could give you. I wrote a book explaining in great detail why I left the Democrat Party. It's called For Love of Country, Leave the Democrat Party Behind. And in this election, the choice was very clear for me in why I endorsed President Trump over Vice President Kamala Harris. It is because of those fundamental rights and freedoms that are enshrined in our Constitution and the words that our founders had for us in this country as Americans, our right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Under Vice President Harris over these past 4 years, along with Joe Biden, they have undermined our freedom and continue to do so. They have weaponized government entities to go after their political opponents. I've personally experienced political retaliation by this administration, putting me on a domestic terror watch list called Quiet Skies just one day after I did an interview criticizing Kamala Harris's record as vice president and talking to the American people about the dangerous consequences of a Kamala Harris presidency. They have ruined our economy, increased the cost of living. We're seeing increased crime, open borders, over tens of millions of illegal immigrants coming across our borders, many of them actually violent convicted criminals coming from other countries. And on a foreign policy front, they have embroiled us in multiple wars in different parts of the world and have pushed us to the brink of World War III and closer to nuclear war than we ever have been before. On every account, the choice is clear that President Trump in this election is our best hope as a country to get back on that path where we can look to a future of peace and freedom and prosperity for all Americans.
You're supporting Kamala Harris. Why should people vote for Kamala Harris?
I think they should vote. Do you want me to talk in here?
Talk in there, yeah.
I think they should vote for Kamala Harris because she's competent, she's consistent, she is an honorable person, and she's always done her best her whole professional life for the people she served, either in California or the whole nation as a senator and now as vice president. I think she's a great candidate. I think she's a very serious woman who also is warm and cares about the average American, all average Americans. And I think the alternative is atrocious. I think he's been, as a survivor of sexual assault, he has been proven in a court of law to be guilty of that. That's not an opinion, that's a fact. Mm-hmm. And so on behalf of all our little boys and little girls in this country, what message are we sending to them if we're saying that somebody who has been convicted of sexual assault in a court of law is okay to be president of the United States? No, they're not okay. We need an example of somebody who's honorable and has character and a sense of ethics and humanity. And Donald Trump possesses none of those things. And Kamala Harris possesses all of those things, along with a career's decades-long history of public service, working for her citizens. It's just that simple. It's gun control. There's women's right to choose. There's education. There's so many things. There's healthcare. There's the environment. On all these issues, if we want to protect this country and all of its citizens, there's no other choice than Kamala Harris.
But then, there are people who are still holding their vote. They're not sure why they should vote for Kamala Harris. What would you tell them? Like, the swing state voters. We're in Pennsylvania, independent voters. What would you tell them?
I would say voting for Kamala Harris is voting for a better future for your children or your nieces or nephews or whomever. It's also sending a message that we want a person who is not a liar, at the very least, and is a caring person who's dedicated their life to this country.
Now you're from
That's what I'd say.
You're from Tamil Nadu, so is the vice president.
Yes.
Have you guys ever talked about that at all?
Yeah, we talk about it all the time. I've known her over the years and in different situations. And yeah, we talk about it. We used to talk about food. She loves to cook. And her grandfather lived right around the corner from my grandfather. So I know exactly, where she comes from. And that's very much a part of her. Her Indian roots are really a part of her because she was raised by Indian women,
Right.
and you can see it in her mannerisms. You can see it in how she speaks. And it's very basically, voting is a choice in this election between hate and love.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to shoot a path, vote for a path for hate and division in our country, there's your answer. If you want to move forward and choose love and empathy and kindness towards all of us that share this land, vote for Kamala Harris.
India today is on the ground to cover this very important election and all the action that's taking place, for example, in the New York City. India Today's Foreign Affairs editor Geeta Mohan sent us what precisely has been happening on the ground, specifically, for example, because amid the election season was also the festive season of Deepavali, and there were many supporters on the ground, specifically Trump supporters. And why would Indian Americans be supporting Donald Trump? Here's how Geeta Mohan found out.
These are the last moments of an election slugfest. Leaders fighting it out to the last breath to ensure they gain control of Washington, D.C. It could impact capitals across the world. Watch India Today for detailed coverage on U.S. presidential elections 2024.
Here you have the Indian community events taking place, Diwali celebrations here in Long Island. We spoke to a few leaders over here, community leaders, all of them very enthusiastic about voting, about US elections, and also about Trump. We have to wait and see what happens and how America decides on the 5th of November. But these are visuals of the Indian diaspora coming together to celebrate Diwali here in Long Island. This is Geeta Mohan reporting for India Today Global.
भारतीय वोट बैंक कितना इम्पोर्टेंट है इस इलेक्शन में? हर इलेक्शन में इम्पोर्टेंट होता है, लेकिन ज्यादातर डेमोक्रेट्स के लिए इम्पोर्टेंट होता है. तो इस बार कितना इम्पोर्टेंट है भारतीय वोट बैंक?
भारतीय इसलिए बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट है, चाहे हम बहुत माइनॉरिटी में हैं, लेकिन हमारे जो रिलीजन है, जैसे अभी विभूति जी ने बताया कि हमारे पास दिवाली की छुट्टी नहीं है, लेकिन कई लोगों ने इलेक्टेड ऑफिशियल्स ने हेल्प किया. तो न्यूयॉर्क सिटी में दिवाली की छुट्टी बच्चों को है स्कूल में. तो लेकिन हम ये चाहते हैं कि जब हम लोग काम कर रहे हैं, हमारे भी होने चाहिए, लेकिन हम इलेक्टेड ऑफिशियल्स को उनको तभी चुने जो हमारी माइनॉरिटी को ध्यान दे सके, इकोनॉमिकली, हमारे रिलीजियस के लिए और हमारे फ्यूचर, हमारे बच्चों के लिए, एजुकेशन के लिए बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट है.
It's the most important race for the White House and really getting close. Opinion polls are showing that it could be a neck-and-neck fight. Democrat nominee Kamala Harris and Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump. Now, according to the opinion polls, the surveys, for example, in Pennsylvania, and let's go one by one. In Pennsylvania, shows Donald Trump leading, but by just 1%. Predicted to get about 49% of vote share, and Kamala Harris accordingly about 48%. For Georgia, which is going to be one of the big crucial states, is predicting Donald Trump could actually get 50% vote, but Harris will get not the rest 50, but 48. In North Carolina, Harris and Trump are expected to be on the similar line of about 48% votes each. But amid all of this, remember, it's as much about who has been campaigning in the last leg as well. Donald Trump, according to some of the opinion polls, is leading in Arizona, while Harris is better off in Wisconsin. These states are important, remember, because some of these are swing states, which means they may go either way, and that could decide the elections for the United States of America and possibly for global politics as well.
But I've come today with a message of hope for all Americans. With your vote, this election, most important election you've ever even thought about voting in, I will end inflation. I will stop the invasion of criminals pouring into our country, and I will bring back the American dream.
We have an opportunity in this election to turn the page on a decade of Donald Trump, trying to keep us divided and afraid of each other. That is who he is, but Madison, that is not who we are.
Do you like it better now or 4 years ago? Well, I ask it a different. You like it better now or 4 years ago? And I've come today with a message of hope for all Americans. With your vote on Tuesday, I will end inflation. I will stop the invasion of massive numbers of criminals coming into our country. Thank you very much, Kamala and Joe. And I will bring back the American dream, and we'll bring it back stronger than ever before. But this is all you need to know. Kamala broke it, and we will fix it, and we're going to fix it fast.
Just imagine on January 20th. Because if he is elected, if Donald Trump is elected, he's going to be sitting in that Oval Office stewing over his enemies list. Because he spends full time plotting revenge and retribution. So imagine on January 20th, it's either that, him plotting over his enemies list, or me working for you on my to-do list.
Coming in on the sidelines of the upcoming U.S. presidential elections, it is the market that is facing the kind of consequences of it. Remember that there is a lot of uncertainty ahead of any election that takes place, and it's the USA after all. We are told that the Sensex has fallen over 1,300 points. The Sensex crashing 1,300 points, and the market showing that kind of a slide over 1,000 points is important. This also means that the investors are turning cautious, possibly over and ahead of the presidential elections upcoming. Right, so that's a big news coming in, that for now, the latest is that the share market is tumbling. This is early trade, and investors are definitely turning cautious ahead of what happens. Will it be Kamala Harris, Donald Trump, and all that will come in with it? Let's go across to our colleague from Business Today, Shailendra Agarwal, on this. Shailendra, how do you view this? Shailendra Bhatnagar, I correct myself. What do you think is the reason of this crash? What happens? Because what is the connection here of the elections and the market?
Good morning, Pooja. Thank you for having me over. It's fairly simple. It is the US debt market which is troubling not only Indian equities, but equities across the board. And the uncertainty that you have in the US elections, nobody knows who's going to win, which is Kamala Harris or Donald Trump. And that is the reason why you see US 10-year bond yields are spiking. They are at their 5-month highs. And that essentially means from all across the world, money will move back to the US because the dollar is getting stronger. And that's the reason why you see excessive selling that is happening in India, not only in India, but all emerging markets. And you see this fear that is because of the US election now coming to haunt Indian markets. On Dalal Street, even second quarter earnings were terrible. So it is a combination of excessive overvaluation, excessive froth, and now this causation with the US markets as well. Pooja.
Can we expect this to continue, the fluctuation, at least till very clear decision has come about the United States of America's new president?
Yes. So that is one major issue. Okay. We need to know who will be the winner, and more importantly, what will that winner do to the US debt. If these yields continue to rise, then I'm afraid all equity markets across the world, including Indian equity markets, will continue to fall, because a strong dollar does not mean anything good for local equities.
Shailendra, also help us understand, for those who may not understand the technicality of these red graphs, what does the red really signify, and till when we are expecting perhaps for it to stabilize in the hours or the days to come for now?
Actually, Pooja, much will depend upon what the eventual winner of the US elections does with the US debt. As I have said, the US 10-year yield has to calm down for equities to start rising. My simple advice is, if you have good quality mutual funds, please do not stop your systematic investment plan. In fact, this would be the best time to buy good quality equity mutual funds, especially on the large cap space. The quality of Indian markets over the next 2 or 3 months will be tested, but we will come out better from this sell-off.
I think eventually your signing off point is the most important. That's the advice to the investors as well, specifically in India. Thank you so much, Shailendra. I'll keep coming back to you over all the updates coming in.
Hello and welcome to this special edition of Elections Unlocked US Special. I'm joining you from New York and we'll be talking about everything that has to do with US elections. In less than 24 hours, America will be voting its new president, the 47th president of the United States of America. While Donald Trump and Kamala Harris are trying to energize their supporters, they present a very different picture of America. Donald Trump is talking about economic revival, while Kamala Harris also focuses on humanitarian efforts. However, when it comes to polls, there is a slight lead that Donald Trump has in the swing states, but Kamala Harris is leading in the national polls. Let's take a look at how the two are faring at the polls.
Chest thumping, beating trumpets. Both candidates for the US presidential election tried to ensure that their voters remain confident before the 5th November vote.
But all I can say is on Tuesday, just go out and vote, and we're going to close this thing out, and it's going to be party time. It's going to be party time. And this is really all you need to know. Kamala broke it, and I'll fix it, and we'll do it very quickly.
So, Michigan, 2 days to go. You ready? In one of the most consequential elections of our lifetime, and we have momentum. It is on our side. Can you feel it? And we have the momentum because our campaign is tapping into the ambitions, the aspirations, and the dreams of the American people. Because we are optimistic and excited about what we can do together.
Both promised voters of a golden future. While one talked about tax and price cuts, the other promised to end a war.
So with your vote on Tuesday, we're going to fire Kamala, and we are going to save America. We will cut your taxes, end inflation, slash your prices, raise your wages, and bring thousands of factories back to America and back to the good old state of Georgia.
And I want to say, this year has been difficult, given the scale of death and destruction in Gaza, and given the civilian casualties and displacement in Lebanon. It is devastating. And as president, I will do everything in my power to end the war in Gaza. To bring home the hostages, end the suffering in Gaza, ensure Israel is secure, and ensure the Palestinian people can realize their right to dignity, freedom, security, and self-determination.
One thing is for sure, that this was a very colorful election campaign and both candidates have been neck and neck throughout. Posters are busy predicting the front runner. Atlas Inter's latest poll shows former President Donald Trump leading the predictions, especially in all 7 swing states. About 49% of the respondents said they would vote for Donald Trump in the upcoming presidential election, as the Republicans hold a 1.8% vote lead over his counterpart, Democrat Kamala Harris. The survey conducted on the first 2 days of November included nearly 2,500 likely voters in the US, the majority of which were female. A Reuters Ipsos poll published last week on 29 October showed Kamala Harris lead over Donald Trump, with the Democrat ahead by few percentage points over the Republican, 49% to 46%. The American website 538 of ABC focuses on opinion poll analysis. In their latest release, Harris had a small lead over Trump in the national polling averages, 48% to 47%.
Making Donald Trump one of the biggest losers.
The current Vice President Kamala Harris has led Trump in every Reuters, Ipsos and ABC 538 poll of registered voters since she entered the race in July and built a lead of nearly 4 percentage points towards the end of August. The polls were relatively stable in September and early October, but they have tightened in the last couple of weeks, with her lead steadily shrinking since late September. While national polls are a useful guide as to how popular a candidate is across the whole country, they are not the best way to predict the US presidential election result. Bureau Report, India Today.
Kamala, you're fired. Get out of here.
Polls are not sacrosanct, but they are indicators, and very strong ones at that. In fact, Carnegie Endowment has conducted a poll in which they talk about how significant Indian American voters have become in these elections. There has been a shift from being blue-leaning to the red camp. Rohit Sharma and I bring you this report on how 2.6 million registered Indian American voters are thinking this election.
With a population of approximately 5.2 million, Indian Americans are the second largest immigrant community in the United States, behind only Mexican Americans. And this election, they want to stamp their presence with their clear demands.
हमारे पास दिवाली की छुट्टी नहीं है, लेकिन कई लोगों ने इलेक्टेड ऑफिशियल्स ने हेल्प किया, तो न्यूयॉर्क सिटी में दिवाली की छुट्टी बच्चों को है स्कूल में. हम इलेक्टेड ऑफिशियल्स को उनको तभी चुने जो हमारी माइनॉरिटी को ध्यान दे सके.
Indian Americans have remained deeply connected to the Democratic Party traditionally, but there has been a shift since 2020. According to the Indian American Attitude Survey 2024, published by the Carnegie Endowment, American Indians are high propensity voters. And an astonishing 96% of around 2.6 million Indian Americans registered to vote will likely end up voting in the 2024 elections. The survey found that 57% of respondents lean Democratic, 27% lean Republican, and 14% are true independents. Using this metric, the share of Democrats has declined to 57% from 66% in 2020, and that of Republicans has risen to 27% from 18%.
ट्रम्प का जो रिकॉर्ड है 4 साल का वो आपके सामने है. लोएस्ट इन्फ्लेशन, highest employment, highest rate of effective earning, not nominal earning, effective earning, and no war started by him.
सपोर्ट करता हूं ट्रंप को क्योंकि बाइडेन हैरिस प्रेसिडेंसी ने जो इलीगल इमिग्रेशन किया है बहुत सारी प्रॉब्लम्स क्रिएट करी हैं.
A lot of people are converging there because they know how important Pennsylvania is. 19 electoral college votes from the state of Pennsylvania, and these volunteers and voters believe that that they can actually convince some of those independent voters that will end up deciding who gets to the White House.
Basically what I was doing is talking to all the different volunteers and making sure that they have Minivan downloaded on their phone, which Minivan is a platform that allows you to see all of the voters and the person that you're talking to information in a succinct place, to allow everything to be there with a script as well, to make it easier for the people who are door knocking, to make sure it's the most simplest activity that you could be doing.
Swing states, how the electoral college works here, the swing states kind of decide who the president is. So I live in Maryland, right? So I vote, but I feel like I have to do work in the swing states, right? Mobilize people, because their say is going to determine who is going to be the president for all of us.
Both Democrats and Republicans have been wooing Indian Americans for election funding. Though Indian Americans are less than 2% of America's population, their median annual household income of approximately $153,000 or about 1.3 crore rupees is more than double that of the country as a whole. And that makes Indian Americans a powerful voting community in this election season. With Geeta Mohan and Rohit Singh, Bureau Report, India Today.
Have said, who is going to be better for India, right? I mean, is it Donald Trump? Is it Vice President Trump? Have said, who is going to be better for India, right? I mean, is it Donald Trump? Is it Vice President Kamala Harris? What would you like to tell them?
I'd say that if we elect Kamala Harris tomorrow, we will have the first president ever who visited India as a child, who has Indian relatives, who experience what it's like to really know India from that perspective, not just as a geopolitical ally, but really from the bottom up. I mean, I feel like I have a different kind of sense of India myself from having gone there every few years, talking to my relatives, seeing my WhatsApp with all my Indian relatives on it. You know, you just experience things in a very different way. And I think her added understanding of India from that perspective is an unfathomable asset in the bilateral relationship between the United States and India. And I think India will be very proud to have a daughter of India as president of the United States.
You know, one last question. I know everybody is going to Pennsylvania. What are you doing between now and results come out? Where will you be? What are you doing to make sure you guys do everything you can to elect her?
Well, I'm heading out to York, Pennsylvania this afternoon to get out the vote, to canvass. I really think this election is crucial. It's every vote counts, and really it's up to all of us. So I've been out. I was in Georgia, and I've been north to North Carolina a couple of times, and now I'm heading out to Pennsylvania, and I'll be in Pennsylvania tomorrow as well to get out the vote and to really, you know, there are people who have some last minute questions, answering every question. We are earning every vote in this election. Kamala Harris is earning every vote, and so we're all out hitting the pavement for her to, you know, really grasp this moment. And I think, again, I would just say, I think the election really does boil down to, for the Indian American community and for all communities, whether all of our voices will be part of this or whether just some of our voices will be heard. And, you know, we've all lived through periods where there's more bias and anger, and then there's periods where we feel more welcome. And I just think, you know, we stand at a moment where Indian American voices will not just be heard, but will roar in this election.
You know, I did say one last question. I do have one more now.
Sure.
How's President Biden looking at this, you know, election cycle? I know, you know, he made the move. He stepped out of the race. What are his thoughts? Because you are an advisor to the president.
I am.
So tell us, what is he thinking? What's going on in the White House? Give us some details.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. You know, the president is really proud of the vice president. As he said, you know, he was a vice president. He knows every vice president, every vice president runs is their own person. She will have her own policies, but I think he's incredibly proud of her, and he wants nothing more than her to succeed. I think he thinks it was a great decision to select her as vice president, and I think he really does. He's first in line as her fan, but also recognizes she will have a different presidency. She has additional advisors. She's running her own race. And I think that's really the position of respect that he has for her.
Now, the U.S. election is a very complex and complicated process. Let's just explain it to you in a brief report by Ishita Mitra. It is a combination of direct and indirect elections wherein voters first vote in their candidates, and then on the basis of the votes, electors are decided. It's then the Electoral College that really decides and picks the winner. Take a look at this report.
As the clock ticks down to the election day in the US, millions of Americans are gearing up to cast their ballots to choose their next president. But while over 150 million voters may take to the polls, it's 538 electors at the end of the day who will decide who steps into the White House. So how does this intricate dance of democracy unfold? Let's understand. So in America, when you head to the polls, you're not just choosing a candidate, you're also selecting a group of people pledged to that candidate. In this case, it would be Kamala Harris or Donald Trump. Now, this group is comprised of people called as electors. Now, each state in America, there are 50 states, has its own set of electors tied to the popular vote within its borders. And the process of choosing electors is what converts individual choices into a collective decision. So, how do states allocate their electors And what is the magic number needed here? Now, this is a simple formula which is tied to the size of their congressional delegation. So, under the Electoral College, all 50 states and the District of Columbia get electoral votes which is equal to their 2 senators and their number of representatives. For example, Georgia as a state has 2 senators and 14 representatives. So, this means the state will have 16 electors. And since representatives are based on the size of the population, the smaller states like Alaska and Wyoming get about 3 each, while giants like California has 54 and Texas has 40 electoral votes. Now, these numbers are dynamic. They keep shifting every 10 years with the census that realigns congressional seats based on the population changes. And the most recent census was conducted in the year 2020, which altered the electoral map, affecting how much power is distributed among the states. Meanwhile, Washington District, despite its lack of congressional representation, secures about 3 electoral votes thanks to the 23rd Amendment. So now, each of the electoral represents about 1 electoral vote, and these electors vote according to who wins the popular vote in the state. For example, almost all US states follow winner-takes-all system, and where the candidate who gets the most votes from the public wins the support of the electors of the state. For example, if a state decides to vote red, then all the votes of the electors would go to Donald Trump. And in total, there are about 538 electoral votes in play, and the magic number is 270 here. This means candidates need a majority of 270 to become the 47th president of the United States. Now, if no candidate receives a majority of the votes, then the House of Representatives elects the president. And this process